During the FBI's purge on Friday, the DOJ asked for the names of every employee involved in the January 6 investigations. But NBC News reports that Acting Director Brian Driscoll pushed back and has not yet turned that list over. There are thousands of names on it, including Driscoll's. And let's not forget that while it feels like forever ago, it was just this time last week that Trump fired 18 independent inspectors general in multiple departments. Joining me now is someone who knows what it's like to be targeted by Trump and MAGA, Andrew Bakaj. He's the chief legal counsel at Whistleblower Aid. He served as the attorney for the whistleblower involved in Trump's first impeachment trial involving Ukraine. He also previously served in the offices of 2 inspectors general. Andrew, it's great to have you on the show. Let me get your thoughts on this new NBC News reporting on the acting FBI director Brian Driscoll's resistance to the firings, saying in a message that circulated widely among Bureau personnel, an FBI agent summarized what happened as, bottom line, DOJ came over and wanted to fire a bunch of J6 agents. Driscoll is an absolute stud, held his ground, and told White House proxy DOJ to F off. What does that do for morale inside the Bureau and for law enforcement in the moment?
Well, first, Ayman, thank you for having me on. With respect to how he's comported himself and pushing back on the firings at the FBI, I commend him for standing up to power. That's exactly what a leader is supposed to do. As far as how that impacts morale at the FBI, I would say that it's got to be an impossible position to be in as an FBI agent currently, or anybody serving within the FBI, whether you're an analyst or an attorney, knowing that your top cover is under attack.
Do you get a sense of what could happen next to somebody like Mr. Driscoll, the deputy director, the acting deputy director, who has taken this position and by doing so now become a public face, if you will, to this resistance within the FBI? And of course, as we have seen and as Trump made clear, he is a president and administration that has sought retribution against these types of officials.
Well, I think that's exactly the case. You know, with Driscoll standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to just turn over a list of individuals who were, by the way, assigned. These special agents did not have a choice as to what investigations they are assigned to, that these individuals who are assigned to these investigations are going to be summarily fired. Him doing that puts him on the target list. And by the way, going back to your point about the IGs being removed, it goes to the heart of the oversight process within the federal government to make sure that fraud, abuse, malfeasance doesn't continue to exist and doesn't exist within the government.
And President Trump, even on the campaign trail, even after he had won, before he was sworn in, had made clear his feelings about people who were involved in the January 6th, certainly on the congressional side when they were investigating him. He made that publicly clear. So when he now says he did not know about what was happening at the FBI, do you think he's trying to get off on a technicality that he did not necessarily order it, but maybe those that he appointed at the Department of Justice, whether it's the Attorney General and on down, knew exactly what he wanted and went out to do it?
I'm not going to speculate as to that. But what I really want to talk about also is why inspectors general and the oversight community within the federal government matters. So one of the things that we need to think about in terms of having government accountability and how that works is that IGs are there to prevent bad things from happening. We all know about investigations that happen after the fact when something goes wrong, but IGs also serve the function of conducting audits and inspections, and that's proactive activity to ensure that something doesn't go wrong. So for example, when I was serving within the IG community years ago, and we were conducting investigations, I'll ask you this question. Have you heard about power units on F-15s failing and a number of aircraft going down? Have you heard about maintenance issues or possible leaks of VX nerve gas occurring within an installation here in the United States? Did you hear about that? No. And that's because whistleblowers came forward proactively to the Inspector General, filed these disclosures, and the IG was able to conduct an investigation to get to the bottom of it before anything happened. So as we're talking about things, whether it's the event in Washington where we had an Army helicopter and a civilian aircraft collide, or even wildfires in California, oversight and accountability matters, and having independent IGs matters. And it also matters because it's important for the whistleblowers, like my client from the first impeachment, to know that there is a system in place that when they file a disclosure, that information will be taken in and an independent investigation will come out of it. And at the same time, part and parcel to having individuals feel comfortable, know that the system there is working, is that if something were to happen, that they're facing retaliation for their whistleblowing, that there is a body out there that has their back that will conduct an investigation, determine whether or not they've been retaliated against. And understanding the circumstances and everything that's happening in DC over the past 2 weeks, which frankly has been chaotic. I've had a number of individuals throughout the federal government reach out to Whistleblower Aid and my organization. We are looking at alternative paths of disclosure, knowing that right now, more than 15 IGs are not in place, and there is questions about credibility and the ability for the government to proceed with independent investigations.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andrew, your organization is one of the most important ones that we have in our country, and I don't like to say this, but it may become even more important in this administration, given what we're seeing and what continues to happen with our government. Andrew Bakaj, Whistleblower Aid, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you. That's why we exist.
Yeah, and we need it more than ever. Thank you.